Hi! Magandang umaga sa iyo kung umaga mo ito pinapanood. Magandang hapon naman kung hapon mo ito pinapanood. At of course, magandang araw kahit nasaan ka mang bahagi ng mundo. Welcome to another session of our discussion regarding the discipline of microeconomics. And of course, today we are going to delve in deeper and explore the intricate nature of this discipline. Primarily, we are going to study some of the most significant and vital economic principles, demand and supply, and of course, the circular flow model of economic activity. Now, the discipline of economics is primarily one of the most important disciplines under the vast umbrella of the social sciences. Some of the thinkers of the contemporary times and of course even in the past believes that economics reigns supreme over the other disciplines of this vast array of subject areas, of topics, of disciplines under social sciences. Economists and of course students of this discipline sees the world differently. They utilize a different lens or a different perspective compared to anthropologists, historians, classicists, and practitioners of other disciplines. Because economists like us often analyze issues and problems using economic theories. And these economic theories are created by observing human action, by observing human behavior. Before an information becomes a theory, it is first regarded as an assumption, a hypothesis, a hypothesis because it haven't been tested yet. Theory and model are two bits of information important in understanding microeconomics. An assumption becomes a theory if it has been proven multiple times and if it is already regarded as a legitimate idea, if it is factual, and so on and so forth. Theory is a simplified representation of how two or more variables interact with each other. Primarily, the purpose of theory is to simplify a complex phenomenon, to simplify it down into essentials. Basically, theory is utilized to explain a weird phenomenon, to explain a complex phenomenon. Now, always remember that a good theory is simple enough to understand but at the same time complex enough to capture the key features, the important elements of a given situation or of a given object or a phenomenon being studied. While on one hand, model often is often utilized by economists and of course practitioners of other disciplines because it is a more applied or empirical representation of an object, a phenomenon, or a subject. Basically, model is often utilized because it is much simple to be used compared to a theory. Models are often graphical representations, visual representations of a complex behavior or of a complex phenomenon. Now, the entire economy consists of transactions and interactions between several key role players such as firms, such as consumers, and so on and so forth. Economy indeed is one important discipline because it encompasses the entire world. In order to buy goods and commodities, you must rely to economy, particularly the economic way of thinking. In order to gain something or to achieve your needs and wants, you need to interact with the market and initiate economic transactions in order to gain what you need and what you want. Basically, the entire economy is built upon the huge and small transactions and interactions between people and the market, between the market and the government, and between the people and the government. However, the entirety of the economy can be simplified by looking at the circular flow model of economic activity. The flow of goods and services, factors of production, and the payments generated by both firms and by household are iterated in this particular concept, in the concept of the circular flow. In Filipino, we call this the economic flow, or I mean the circular flow, or paikot na daloy ng ekonomiya. Basically, the circular flow shows the interconnected nature of the economy and of course the interaction between household and firms. Primarily, we can observe in the circular model that household and firms often exchange goods and services, including factors of productions and so on and so forth. Now, let us study deeper the circular flow models. We have several types of circular flow models which we are going, of course, to explore as we progress in our discussion. This is an example of a circular flow of economic activity model. This is actually the most basic example because there are only two key players, the firms and the household. The simplified circular flow model as shown in our PowerPoint shows spending between household and firms through product and factor markets. The inner arrow shows goods and services flowing from firms to households and factors of production flowing from household to firms. Basically, firms often sell their commodities, their products to households, and in turn, household sells their body, not in a sexual way, but in a sense that they sell their labors to firms in order to generate wage or in order to acquire wage. Those wages, in turn, are utilized by household to buy products from firms. So that is the simplification of the circular flow. Bibili yung household sa firms, yung firms kakailanganin niya yung household kasi kailangan niya yung labor na ibibigay ng mga household. And in turn, para magkaroon ng incentive yung mga household, bibigyan ng firms ngayon yung mga household ng wage o sahod. That sahod will of course amplify the ability of household to buy commodities and to buy materials. Basically, lumalakas yung purchasing power ng households kapag nagtatrabaho sila sa mga firms, and kapag malakas yung purchasing power, makarami silang mabibiling mga produkto. That is the most simple description of the circular flow. Yung money or yung pera ay umiikot-ikot sa ekonomiya. Babalik siya sa'yo. And so on and so forth. Sa paikot na daloy ng ekonomiya, yung pera ay bumabalik din sa'yo. Hindi kagaya ng jowa mong iniwan ka, wala nang posibilidad na bumalik pa siya. However, in the circular flow of the economy, as I stated earlier, money will always return to you because the money you pay to buy a product is possible to be utilized as a payment for your labor and so on and so forth. Now, the circular flow of income or I mean the circular flow of economic activity forms the basis of all economic models. So it is imperative for us economists and practitioners of this discipline to understand the circular flow model not only to explore or to understand not only to actually grasp fully grasp, the um, intricate nature of our economy, but also to understand essential concepts such as national income, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, which are all under macroeconomics. However, we can utilize or use the circular flow of economic activity to understand some important elements under microeconomics as well, because the circular model plays a very important roles. Not only does the circular flow model represents the complexity of the entire economy, it also possesses the ability to mirror and explain microtransactions as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the circular flow doesn't only um, present the flow of money in the economy. It also shows us the interconnected nature, the interdependent nature of many sectors under the market as they facilitate both real and monetary flow. Now, what is real and what is monetary flow? The real flow refers to the flow of factor services and flow of goods and services. Saan ba pumupunta yung mga factors of production? Saan ba napupunta yung mga finished products and so on and so forth? Basically, yung real flow ay yung transfer ng isang product, ng isang commodity from firms to households, while real movement, or monetary flow, refers to the movement of money and cash payment from one sector to the other sector corresponding to the real flow, which we refer to as monetary flow. Monetary flow basically refers to the flow of money in the economy. Firms would often pay the labors of households, and households would utilize the payment to buy commodities and to buy economic goods. If the money is already at the hand of those firms then can repeat the cycle by buying resources or by buying raw materials to create new commodities and new products that they can then sell to household for a considerable price. The household would again be utilized to create those products by using their labor, and of course if the firm sold those products to the households can do so, or can buy those products using the wages, using the sahods, the sueldos they received from the firms. So that is monetary and of course real flow. Always remember, real flow refers to the movement of products, while monetary flow refers to the movement of money. In that case, this particularly means that the demand of other sector becomes the mali. It means, or it signifies, that real flow and monetary flow move in a circular manner in an opposite direction. A continuous flow of production, income, and expenditure is also known as the circular flow of income, which is also under the circular flow of economic activity. Basically, the income of one sector, the income of firms, becomes the expenditure of the other, the expenditure of household. When household spends their money, that money becomes the income of firms or of businesses. Now, in the study of the circular flow model, there are four primary sectors involved. Those primary sectors are, of course, the household sector, the firm sector, the government sector, and of course, the foreign sector. Now, before we proceed to that, the circular flow of income illustrates the interdependence of the sectors and the markets to facilitate both real and monetary flow. The flow of both real and monetary flow encompasses the entirety of the circular flow model itself. Now, let us study the different sectors involved in the circular flow. First is, of course, the household sector. So what is the household sector? The household sector includes all individuals in the economy, you and of course me. The primary function of the household sector is to provide the factors of production, primarily to provide labor. So yung mga nasa household sector, sila yung ginagamit, inuupa, nirerentahan ng mga nasa firm para magtrabaho or para gumawa ng isang produkto or ng isang serbisyo. Hindi lang yon ang gawain ng household sector. The household sectors are also the consumers who consume goods and services or commodities produced by firms. So, yun yung connection sa pagitan ng household and ng firms. Firms creates products and commodities by using the labor of household, and in turn, the finished product created by that labor are sold to the households themselves. The second sector involved in the circular flow, and one of the most important sector arguably, is the firm sector. The firm sector is composed of business entities, corporations, and of course, partnerships. The primary function of the firm sector is to produce goods and services, and they are only capable of doing so if they rent the labor provided by households. The firm sector is also a key player in the market because all goods and services created by the firm sector is sold on marketplaces, in public markets, even in the world market itself. The film sector make factor payments to the household sector by means of wages, sweldos, or sahods. So those are firm sectors. They are capitalists, they are businesses, they are entrepreneurs, they are corporations. All of the big brands, big producing companies you can think of is classified as part of the firm's sector. The second sector is of course the government sector. The government is composed of the center, or I mean the central government, the nation state itself, and local governments. The government's role in the economy is to regulate things. They are only capable of doing so because of their ability to create laws, to execute those laws, and of course, to make sure that those laws are being followed anywhere. Basically, the government regulates the economy itself. The government, under the circular flow, possesses the ability to generate revenue as well as expenditure. The primary reason why the government is able to generate revenue under our economy is because of their ability to impose and levy taxes. Every individual in a particular country has the responsibility to pay their taxes to the government according to their wage, according to their status, and so on and so forth. Those taxes generated by the government would then be utilized to fund social programs and other government works. At the same time, the government also incurs expenditures because the government, in order to actually perform its role as a regulator, in the economy, they must also spend a considerable amount of money to keep the economy going. These are in form of, um, let's say, donations, um, funds given to local businessmen and entrepreneurs to boost the local economy, the domestic economy, and so on and so forth. Basically, gumagastos din ang gobyerno. Halimbawa na lang, kung kailangan niyang pataasin ang educational quality ng Pilipinas, gagastos siya. Kung kailangan niyang tulungan yung mga nasalanta ng bagyo, gagastos din siya under this economy. The third, or I mean the fourth and last sector involved in the circular flow is of course the foreign sector. The final sector in the circular flow is the foreign sector, and the foreign sector is actually the most important sector, especially in the contemporary times. It is the foreign sector. The foreign sector is arguably one of the most important sectors in today because of the benefits gained by countries on FDIs or foreign direct investments. Foreign direct investments are very important because in the contemporary world, the economy is driven by outside capital. Many countries around the world are doing their best in order to attract businessmen and corporations that originates from outside their borders. The foreign sector includes all the transactions conducted by a government or a private individual with the rest of the world. However, it is not secluded only to government sectors that exist outside a given territory. For example, if the Philippines decided to trade with the government of China, we can categorize that as a foreign sector because China is outside our borders, outside our jurisdictions. However, the foreign sector isn't only limited to a government-to-government interaction. It could also include a government-to-corporation interaction or a corporation-to-corporation interaction, given that one of those key players are outside a given country or as operates as a foreign entity, and so on and so forth. The foreign sector makes the principle of export and import possible. Now, export and import is actually a basic idea in the world trade system or in the economic trade. Now, the foreign sector, particularly the concepts of import and export, is only made possible by the use of foreign trade. Now, let us study the different types of circular flow models. The most basic model involves two sector only, and I believe I've already discussed that earlier. But let us discuss it again in order for you to actually truly grasp the meaning, the intricate details of the basic model. Let me first show you an example of the basic circular model. This is the basic circular model, and mind you, it only composed of two sectors, firms and household. In this model, we assume that the economy is a closed economy. A closed economy because it doesn't have any outside sectors such as the government, such as the sectors or foreign sectors, and so on and so forth. It does not participate in international trade. As I mentioned earlier, In this type of model, the household is the sole buyer of the products produced by firms, while firms are the only or sole supplier of the factors, or I mean of the commodities or of the products. The household sector spends the entire income they got or they generate from producing labor in purchasing goods and services produced by firms. This implies that in this particular model, there is no saving, no investment, and so on and so forth. If you have noticed, that particular statement is legitimate and fact because in this two-sector model, um, banks or other important sectors under the investment sector is actually non-existent. Basically, the income of the producers is equal to the income of the households, which in turn is also equal to the consumption expenditure of the household. Basically, the demand of the economy is equal to the supply. However, let us proceed to another version of the two-sector model. However, this time, let us assume that households indeed make significant investments or they generate loans, they actually earn their money, and with that, let us add the financial market. The financial market consists of cooperatives, banks, and so on and so forth. Any type of financial institution that provides loans that allows household to gain debts or to actually um, or make investments basically. So those are financial markets or financial institutions. Now, in this particular model, the saving by the household would imply monetary withdrawal from the circular flow of income. Basically, when the household saves part of their wages or of their money, konti lang din yung firm, yung money, I mean, na mapupunta dun sa firm. Kasi remember, dun sa una, equal yung demand sa supply. Kung anong pera or anong money meron yung household, ibibili niya ng products and services na manggagaling sa firms. However, when we add financial market, mababawasan ngayon yung revenue na makukuha ng firm. Mababawasan din naman yung expenditure ng household. Pero mind that the money invested by the household to financial markets or banks will also proceed to firms. Babalik pa rin siya sa mga firms in form of investment or loans. Yung mga firms, nangungutang sila sa mga bangko in order to keep their businesses functioning para mapigilan nilang mabankrupt and so on and so forth kapag meron silang mga bagong business endeavors and they do not have the adequate financial capability to pursue those business endeavors, lumalapit sila sa mga bangko at humihiram sila ng mga loans. Now, let us proceed to the three-sector model. So, always remember that the two-sector model has two types. The first is the basic model, the closed economy without financial institutions or financial market. And the second one has financial market in it. A two-sector model with saving and investment. Basically, households are engaged in investment while firms are engaged in loans and so on and so forth. Now, let us proceed to the three-sector model. The three-sector model, added the government sector. In this particular model, it highlights the primary role played by the government sector. Actually, we can say that this model is an accurate depiction of reality because it includes the economic activities conducted by the government in our society. In the entirety of our economy, it isn't only the household and the firms that engages in economic transactions. Governments also creates economic transactions and engages financially on both firms and household. How? Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the government levies taxes to household and firms. The government also provides subsidies to both firms and household. The government also purchases products, and those products are often used to satisfy the dwindling supply or the dwindling needs of the households and so on and so forth. However, one major act conducted or committed by the government in our economy is also borrowing. They can also borrow money from financial markets themselves in order to bolster the economy. For example, the government do not have the adequate funds to actually support its social work. They can generate the needed money if they borrow from financial markets, if they borrow from banks such as the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and so on and so forth. Similarly, the government can also invest. Basically, the government performs both the role of firms and the role of household in a way more complex manner. Now, let us proceed to the last model, the third model, the fourth sector model. The new addition added in this model is of course the foreign sector, and this model is the complete model of the circular flow of economic activity because it includes the four macroeconomic sectors: firms, government, households, and foreign sectors. Basically, the four sector model outlines how the entire economy works in the present. Basically, meron ng foreign sector. Foreign sectors can import their goods or export their goods in the goods market, while the government can also export domestic goods in foreign markets. The transaction, of course, of foreign sector are conducted in virtue of the export and import system. Now, let us proceed to another important element under the microeconomics: leakages and injection in the circular flow of income. So what are these two principles? First, let us study leakages. Leakages are the part of the income which the household withdraw from the circular flow and is not used to purchase goods and services. This part of the income does not go to the goods market. Basically, leakages are the monetary funds, the money not utilized by the households to buy finished goods or finished products. Hindi siya nailalagay sa paikot na daloy. May mga halimbawa tayo ng leakages. There are three primary examples of leakages. First is saving. Saving is not a leakages kasi nga if a household saves, it means they will not be able to utilize that money to buy a finished product because that money would then go to banks, to their savings account, and so on and so forth. Second, taxes. Tax is paid by the household to the government. Basically, the household will not be able to utilize that money to buy their needs and wants because they have to actually conform to the demand of the government. The money would go to the government in form of tax, and essentially they won't be able, or the household won't be able to actually spend that money. Third are imports. Import payments are often made to the foreign sector for the goods and services bought from them. It is an outflow of income from the economy. Second are injections. Injections, in contrast to um, leakages, it refers to the action of adding money into the economy. Kung sa leakages, yung money ay hindi nagagamit ng household hindi nagagamit ng household para bumili ng materials, ng commodities. Ito namang injection, ito yung paraan ng gobyerno or of an individual to add money in the economy. There are three main types or examples of injection. First is investment. Investment happens when an individual or the government uses the money um, to help a firm expand their capital. For example, I am an individual and I earn, let's say, 25 to 30,000 a month. I will utilize 10% of that income to support a growing business here in San Mateo. That is an example of investment. Second is government expenditure. So the government, as I have mentioned earlier, often spends their money to support several programs. Hindi lang sila basta-basta nagpopondo, bumibili din sila. Minsan bumibili sila ng mga gamit from other countries para magamit ng mga tao dito sa Pilipinas. Minsan gumagastos din sila para sa mga temporary aid na ginagamit para maibsan yung paghihirap ng mga tao. An example we can utilize is during the pandemic. The government spend millions of pesos to provide cash bonds, to provide foods for the ailing Filipinos during the pandemic. Second are retirement benefits, social security, and primarily pensions. Pension is one of the primary expenditure of the government. If I am not wrong, they actually spend a considerable amount of money to satisfy or to provide the pension of many Filipinos in the country. And last is again export. Export receipts are the payment made by the foreign sector for the purchase of domestic goods. It is an inflow of income from the foreign sector to the financial markets. Those are examples of injections. Leakages and injections are important in the circular flow of income because it outlines the movement of money in our economy. Now that we are finished studying and simplifying the different models of circular flow of economic activity, it is now time for us to understand the intricate details and inner workings of supply and demand. I know that you are familiar with the law of supply and demand. An assumption, a hypothesis, or a theory only becomes a law in a discipline if it is proven true repeatedly. Now, the law of supply and the law of demand are contemporary trends often observed on economic situations or economic circumstances. The law of supply and the law of demand are always accurate and are always true. Supply and demand is often utilized by economists to understand the current standing and the current situation of an economy. Now, let us discuss first the law of demand. The law of demand basically refers to the situation when a price of something goes down, more people would likely buy it, which is also reasonable. Sometimes, even though people does not really demand for a particular object, if they see or saw that the price of that particular commodity plummeted, they would immediately buy it. This is true among parents. Yung mga nanay natin, kahit hindi naman nila kailangan, for example, yung isang product, bibilhin nila kasi mababa ang presyo. Bibilhin nila kasi maganda yung offer, and so on and so forth. Ganon din naman kapag tumaas ang presyo, kabaliktaran ang mangyayari. If the price of a commodity or a product goes up, people or consumers would buy less. Because honestly, who would want to spend tons of money for a single product, right? Especially if the product has other, let's say, meron naman siyang ibang mga kagaya or kaparehas na pwede mong gamitin kapalit. Meron siyang mga substitute products and so on and so forth. The law of demand explains to us that there is an existing inverse relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity people are willing to buy. Basically, the demand of an individual to a product always or sometimes or most of the time depends on the price of that product, including the quantity demanded or to be bought by that particular individual. If the product is in a, let's say, lower price, an individual would willingly buy lots of units or lots of that particular product. If that particular product is expensive, of course, there is a possibility that the individual would buy that product. However, the quantity would be much lower, and so on and so forth. Now, let us proceed to the law of supply. Law of supply is another important law in both micro and macroeconomics. Basically, the law of supply suggests that if the price of a good or services rises, the quantity supplied increases. Why? Kasi firms or businesses will be able to see that they might actually generate thousands or lots of income if they create a product that has high price or that possess or that can be sold in a high price. For example, if I am a businessman, a starting businessman, of course, I would love to actually create a product that sells more for a bigger price than a product that sells a smaller price. The quantity supply also increases if the product price is, of course, expensive or if it is rising. Now, if the price falls, the quantity supply would also decrease because they will no longer see any type of, let's say, um, they will not, or the firms will not be able to generate revenue if they focus on producing a product that has lower price. So that is the essence of the law of supply. Pag mas mahal yung produkto, mas gugustuhin ng mga firms to produce that specific product. Pero pag mura, it is possible na baka hindi din sila mag-produce ng ganong product kasi makikita nila they will be able to actually rationalize that hindi sila kikita kung yung product na yon na may mababang presyo ang bibigyan nila ng pansin or pagbibigyan nila ng tuon and so on and so forth. Now, in analyzing the law of supply and the law of demand and generally the entirety of the economy itself, economists often utilize the concept of ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus originated from the Latin statement that means all other things being equal or holding everything else in constant. In economics, it is used to simplify analysis by focusing on the effect of one factor, while assuming that all other factors remain unchanged. Basically, ceteris paribus is a mode of analysis employed and utilized by economists in order to actually create a reasonable and, of course, a sound analysis, a sound conclusion in order to generate a sound assumption. Ceteris paribus is utilized also to prevent any misconception from ever being created or from ever rising or emerging, because ceteris paribus forces economists to look only in a single or on a single perspective. They need to analyze one part only while disregarding all other external factors and so on and so forth. By doing so, the economist can create a sound judgment without being distracted by other lenses or by other perspectives. It forces the economist to focus on one thing, that is the ceteris paribus. Now, economists use the term demand to refer to the amount of goods or service consumers are willing to buy. Demand is often anchored in the needs and wants of the individuals. Now, what a buyer pays for a unit is often called price. Price refers to the value of a commodity or a product demanded by the individual. Now, there are varying price for several commodities or several products. And sometimes or oftentimes the primary reason why a product is expensive is because it took a lot of effort for that product to be made. The price of a product is also defined by its rarity. If a product or a commodity is rare, it means it is more valuable. Hence, it is more expensive compared to other products. The total number of units that consumers would purchase at the price is called the quantity demanded. Quantity demanded refers to the willingness of the people to buy a specific quantity or a specific number of a specific or a particular product. To understand the dynamics of demands, economists often use graphs in order to represent it graphically or visually. Using a model allows the economist to simplify complex trends and complex situations in the economy. Now, to actually present the inner workings of supply and demand in a particular economic setting, economists often use demand curves and demand, wait lang, I've almost forgot, demand curves and demand schedules. A demand curve shows the relationship between price and quantity demanded on a graph. So I have an example of a demand curve in here. A demand curve for gasoline, for the product gasoline. Now, if you can see, nakalagay dyan kung ilang quantity ng gasoline yung binibili ng mga tao sa bawat presyo. That is the demand curves. Now, if you are going to study several demand curves for products, they are somewhat different from one another. There are demand curves that are relatively steep. There are demand curves that are flat. There are also demand curves that are straight or curved. However, generally speaking, all demand curves are sloped or skewed from left to right. This signifies that if the price increases, the quantity demanded for a product decreases, and conversely, As the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases. Basically, demand curves mirrors the law of demand itself. Next is, of course, demand schedule. Demand schedule is like a menu showing how many units of a product people are willing to buy. Basically, this refers to the quantity of commodities that people are willing to buy for a given price. An example is, let me provide a commodity. For example, cell phone. Cell phone are more than willing to buy. People or individuals, customers I mean, are more than willing to buy 5 cell phones if the price is lower. However, as the price increases, the quantity demanded for a product decreases. The only difference between demand schedule and demand curve is that in demand curve, the law of demand is represented through a graph. However, in demand schedule, it is represented using a table. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are several factors that identifies or that influences the demand for a particular product, and price is one of the primary factor, as always iterated in the law of demand. Sabi nga natin sa law of demand, kapag mas mahal ang presyo ng isang bagay, mas mababa yung demand para sa product na yon. However, price is not the only factor that determines the ability of people to buy products in quantities or in large quantities. It is not the only factor that actually influences the demand for a commodity. There are other elements at play as well, and those are the things that we are going, of course, to study. First element that influences the demand for a specific product is, of course, customer preference. Changes in the preferences of a customer has direct consequences for demand. For example, sa panahon natin ngayon, medyo mainit, hindi ba? Because we are under the summer season. Kapag lalabas ka, maapektuhan ka because of the scorching heat, the high humidity, and the increasing temperature day by day. Dahil sobrang init, customers would prefer to eat products that are cold, such as ice cream, such as fruits that has lots of water in it, and so on and so forth. That is an example of how customer preference affects the demand for a specific product. If a customer prefers a product, they will certainly buy that specific product. It is also influenced by the product's popularity. If the product is popular, the customer would always certainly prefer that particular product. For example, in phones, iPhones are more renowned, more sought by customers, more preferred by customers. Hence, the demand of iPhone is considerably larger than the demand for Samsung phones and other types of Android phones. The second factor that influences demand is the prices of related goods and services. So, mali yung nakasulat dito. It should be prices of related goods and services. This iterates the fact na kapag yung isang commodity ay mahal, mas ginugusto ng mga taong bilhin na lang yung ibang goods or yung ibang commodities. Dito pumapasok ngayon yung tinatawag nating complementary and substitute products. We have an example here. A complement we can utilize. An example of complementary products we can utilize is coffee and donut. You cannot certainly buy a donut without coffee kasi kailangan mo yung coffee para isawsaw yun, or kailangan mo yung coffee para maging sawsawan ng donut. This is actually true in America because this is the tradition in America. However, it is not applicable in the Philippines. So let me utilize another example. Let me contextualize an example for us to understand what complementary products truly are. An example we can utilize is toothpaste and of course toothbrush. Toothpaste and toothbrush is a complementary product because you cannot actually use the product without the existence of the other. You cannot use toothpaste without toothbrush. You always need toothbrush in using toothpaste kasi hindi mo naman pwedeng gawing toothbrush yung daliri mo. Hindi mo naman magagamit yung toothpaste pag walang toothbrush. That is an example of a complementary product. If the price of one reduced, the increase for the other or the demand for the other, would increase and vice versa. Second is substitute product. Substitute product refers to the products that you can utilize to replace another product or another commodity. An example is coffee and tea. If the price of one substitute product increase, the substitute product or the demand for the substitute product would increase. For example, tumaas yung kape, yung presyo ng kape, naging 100 per piece or per pack. Of course, mas gugustuhin na lang ng mga taong mag-tea kesa mag-kape. So, yun ang nangyayari under price of related goods and services. Another primary factor that determines and identifies or dictates the demand for a product is the income of a person. Kapag walang income ang isang tao, almost certainly wala siyang pera. At kapag wala siyang pera, wala siyang immediate demand. Because in order to satisfy your demands, you need money to buy whatever commodity, whatever goods or price you need. Without income, you don't have money, and without money, you don't have any immediate demand. Basically, you don't have the right to actually demand for something. Next is demographic characteristics. How is demographic characteristics a vital or a significant factor that influences the demand for a product? Okay, let me provide an example. In the Philippines, hypothetically, a large group of people are engaged in unwanted pregnancy, and abortion is taboo in our society. It is prohibited in our society, so basically it is expected that those groups of people would immediately start a family. And dahil nga sobrang dami nagkaroon ng unwanted pregnancy sa Pilipinas, hypothetically, let us assume na 90% yung increase ng unwanted pregnancy, ibig sabihin, tataas ngayon yung demand sa mga product na related sa mga babies, na related sa mga families, na related sa pregnancy. And that is one way we can utilize, or one example we can utilize to represent how the demographic characteristics of a group of people influences the demand for a specific product. Last, of course, is buyer expectations. How can buyer expectations influence the demand for a product? Okay, let us utilize, for example, a hypothetical situation. Hypothetically, let us assume that the price of gasoline would increase 10 pesos tomorrow. And of course, the consumers knew that gasoline would increase tomorrow. Hence, they would almost certainly proceed to start hoarding gasolines now, thereby increasing the demand for gasolines today. So that is an example. Another example, of course, is if the customer expects that the price of goods will plummet today. If the price of a particular good will plummet today, almost certainly the consumers would then buy that specific product, and so on and so forth. Now we are already finished explaining the complex and intricate nature of demand. It is high time for us to study supply itself. Now, supply is almost entirely similar to demand because supply also, or the principal concept, of supply also utilizes graphs in the form of supply curves and, of course, supply schedule. A supply curve shows the relationship between the price and quantity supplied on a graph. Basically, similar to demand graph, this particular graph also represents the law of supply. And the law of supply states that if the price of a specific product or commodity increases, the supply would also increase. How this is I believe this is an example of a supply curve, and similar also to demand curve, the curves of the graph are always skewed or sloped from left to right. Supply schedule on one hand is like a recipe book for producers. It shows how many units of a product they are willing to supply at different prices. It lists various prices along with the corresponding quantities that producers are willing to offer for sale at each price point. However, always remember that law of supply refers to the increase of supply when the price for that particular commodity increases. However, the law of supply is not always objective. It is not applicable to all products. There are cases in which a higher price will not induce an increase in quantity supplied. It is always prevalent for goods or to goods that cannot be produced, such as real estate or land. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that the law of supply is not always objective because it doesn't encompass all types of goods. Some types of goods are, of course, exempted. Like I said earlier, those types of goods are the goods that we cannot replicate or that we cannot produce, such as land, such as water, and so on and so forth. Now, there are multiple elements that plays a vital role in influencing the supply of a specific commodity. The first is, of course, returns from alternative activities. What is this returns from alternative activities? In order to understand this concept, we must first understand the concept of opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a principle in, what do we call that? In economics, which suggests that a particular product always has its own alternatives. To understand it clearly, let me utilize an example. Hypothetically, I am a businessman and my business is related to agriculture, primarily poultry industry. In poultry industry, you can always have two types of products to sell: eggs and chicken. Now, if I focus on chicken, the opportunity cost and the trade-off I would lose, the foregone alternative I would lose is, of course, the chicken itself. However, return from alternative activities would disrupt the supply of eggs if the chicken showcase more. Of course, sabihin na natin, kung yung chicken ay mas madaling ibenta, mas magandang ibenta kasi mas mahal kaysa dun sa egg, magkakaroon ngayon ng trade-off. Ang magiging trade-off ko ay yung egg. I will no longer choose to sell and produce eggs because I would favor to produce chicken meats more because chicken meat is more highly sought and more expensive compared to chicken eggs. There would then a great decrease in supply of eggs kasi nga nag-switch ako dun sa alternative product. Instead of producing eggs, I started to produce chicken. Second is technology. A change in technology alters the combination of inputs or the types of inputs required in the production process. Basically, if there is a significant improvement in technology, it usually means that fewer or less costly inputs are needed. If the cost of production is lower, the profits available at a given price will increase and producers will produce more. Basically, kung hindi masyadong mahal yung magiging magagastos ng mga sabihin na natin entrepreneur in producing a product, they will be motivated to produce more, to supply more. Kasi nga, mababa yung babayaran nila sa factors of production, sa proseso ng pagbuo ng isang particular na product. Second is seller expectations. Seller expectations is similar to buyer expectations. The only difference is that here, in this particular concept, in this particular context, the seller expectations are anchored in future market conditions. Basically, the entrepreneur tries to actually foresee and predict future market conditions because in business, many decisions are always typically made long before a product is ready for sale. In essence, an entrepreneur always thinks 5 steps ahead because they are trying to predict a future market condition. They are trying to foresee the future. They are trying to identify occurring trends, emerging circumstances in the economic setting. Now, if a seller expects that a particular product or a particular commodity would increase in price, he or she would eventually focus on that particular product. An example is today. Over the course of 5 years, I have noticed that real estate's value always increases as years goes by. Basically, if I am going to utilize this principle, I would actually switch or I would primarily focus on real estate than other businesses. Basically, an entrepreneur could increase and manipulate the supply of a product if he sees that that particular product or that particular commodity would soon be beneficial or would be highly sought for by consumers in the coming years or in the coming days based on observing economic trends and market conditions. Next are natural events. Of course, natural events would effectively disrupt, and even destroy supply chains themselves. Example, nagkaroon ng bagyo. Pag nagkaroon ng bagyo, bumababa ang supply ng bigas kasi nga nagkakaroon ng baha. Mababa yung harvest ng mga producers, and so on and so forth. Pero hindi lang sa ganun nag-ooperate ang natural events. Some firms or some businessmen would often utilize natural events to hoard resources, to hoard supplies, to increase their supply of a particular product which they can then sell after the advent of a natural event. Next, of course, is the number of sellers. So, mali yung nakalagay dyan. Ang nakalagay dyan ay price of factors of production. However, the explanation for that is already reiterated in the technology part. The last factor should be number of sellers. Basically, reasonable lang na kapag mas marami nagtitinda ng isang bagay, mas madami ang supply. For example, here in San Mateo, over the course of many years, I have noticed that every year, the number of sellers in the food industry constantly increases. And because they are constantly increasing, they are not deteriorating in number, the supply for food is very evident. Sobrang dami ng foods, napapaligiran tayo ng foods, and so on and so forth. Pag mas maraming nagtitinda, mas madami ang supply sa mga products. Mas marami yung mga products na mabibili, etc. and etc. Hi! If you are still watching, I congratulate you dahil nakaabot ka sa point na ito. In this particular time, we are going to study 3 more concepts: equilibrium, price ceiling, and price floor. Basically, as the image suggests, equilibrium refers to the situation where demand and supply intersect. Nagmi-meet sila sa gitna. Nangyayari yan kapag merong balance sa economy. It is important to note that equilibrium directly translates to the world balance. Ngayon, kapag may equilibrium, ibig sabihin, walang mga surplus, walang scarcity, and so on and so forth. Basically, that should be the aim of every economy to achieve equilibrium. Next is price ceiling. This is an example of an equilibrium represented in a graph. Itong isa, this curve, letter D with the title D, refers to the demand curve, while the letter S is the supply curve. If the demand and supply curve meets at the center point would be the equilibrium price. And when there is equilibrium, as I stated earlier, there is an absolute balance in the economy. However, in the contemporary times, it is actually hard to attain equilibrium. It is almost impossible to say so, that a country have already achieved an equilibrium, because the entire economy itself is very susceptible to rapid changes. It is constantly changing, and so on and so forth. Next, of course, the last two concepts that we are going to discuss is price ceiling and price floor. Let us differentiate price ceiling and price floor. What is the distinction between these two? What is the distinct characteristics of these two? First is price ceiling. Price ceiling is a legal maximum price that one pays for some good or service, the highest price available for a specific commodity. It is important to note that both price ceiling and price floor are two types of price control. Price control is often utilized by the government in order to ensure balance in the economy and prevent monopoly of prices, to prevent unequal economic trades, and so on and so forth. Price ceiling is a price control utilized by the government to actually provide a maximum price or a maximum value for a specific product. Examples of price ceiling that we utilize in the contemporary times are SRPs, or suggested retail price. Next is price floor. A price floor is the lowest price that one can legally pay for some good or services. Basically, a price floor is the direct contrary of price ceiling. Kung sa price ceiling, yung maximum price, dito naman ay yung lowest price. And of course, the primary example we can utilize is, of course, the minimum wage employed by the government for the labor meant to pay, the labor of individuals. And of course, that ends our discussion. I am very grateful that you stayed until the end of the lesson. It is an achievement to actually remain in the presentation, listening at my disgusting voice, and of course that very infuriating and irritating background. I did wish that you learned a lot today in our discussion, because there's more to come. There's more video presentations and of course face-to-face classes to come. And I will do my best, of course, to clear your misconceptions and deliver the lessons effectively and efficiently, so that you may be prepared when the time comes. Kasi hindi natin alam kung kailan nyo kakailanganin yung knowledge nyo about economics. Basically, kung gusto nyo ituloy kung gusto nyo maging social science enthusiast, kailangan nyo talagang maging magaling pagdating sa iba't ibang mga disciplines under the social studies or social sciences. With that, I thank you Your activities will be sent in our group chat later on. And if you have queries, if you have violent reactions, or any objections, you may contact me at my Telegram account, t.me/Comrade Yuri, or message me at my email, suez@gmail.com, because currently I am not accepting any face-to-face queries. I am too anxious to do that. You can just approach me online. Basta wag lang personal. And with that, I end this particular video presentation, this mind-numbing and grueling presentation. Once again, I thank you for remaining with me and for watching this video. I hope nakatulong ako ng malaki, and I truly hope also that you learned a lot in this discussion. If you have questions, you may, once again, as I have mentioned, if you have questions, you may approach me online. You may message me at my social media accounts, particularly in Telegram and of course in email. Goodbye, everybody.